President Xi has secured a historic third term as a leader of the Chinese Communist Party. Today, I'm going to talk about why his new term is capturing global attention, as well as the revelations coming out of his first address. I'm Michele Carroll. Welcome to the News Diet. China's Communist Party held its Congress last week, which happens every 5 years and reveals the party leader for the next 5 years, as well as any changes to China's top ruling party. There, it was announced that after 2 terms as president and general secretary, Xi Jinping would remain in place to serve a third. This is noteworthy because 2 terms have been the precedent for Chinese rulers for the past 40 years, and the doing away with that opens the possibility of an indefinite Xi rule. The term limit was originally put in place in 1982, shortly after the death of Chinese Communist Revolutionary Mao, who ruled for 27 years. Mao was one of the most influential and controversial figures of the 20th century, whose legacy is one of authoritarianism and whose policies resulted in the deaths of tens of millions of people due to famine, persecution, and execution. The idea was to prevent another autocracy, where one figure couldn't hold absolute power over the whole nation again. Well, in 2018, while Xi was already in power, the term limit was abolished, leading many to suspect an attempt at a longer rule, which was confirmed yesterday. The party Congress revealed Xi for a third term, but also a shakeup to the Politburo, which is the decision-making body of the Communist Party. The Politburo consists of 24 top officials, and within that narrows down to an even more centralized standing committee of 7 who serve as the supreme body, who the General Secretary heads. Overall, the appointments announced signaled a move by Xi to cement his own political thinking by surrounding himself with staunch loyalists. His appointments included security officials, military leaders, engineers, and technocrats, and many are seeing this as a sign of essentially solidifying President Xi's ways of doing things by not leaving much room for contrasting thought. In other words, he's surrounding himself with yes men. This is significant, considering that China is the second largest economy in the world, and therefore modern Chinese politics has a massive impact geopolitically, culturally, and militarily. China is the world's most populous country with a population of 1.4 billion people, according to the World Bank. This is with the Earth's population being at 7.7 billion people. So in this regard, China has a lot of power and sway, and there's always lots of eyes on where they're headed. For example, in President Xi's address over the weekend, he emphasized his desire to pursue a more self-sufficient standing away from international dependence. This comes in the face of several geopolitical conflicts and pushback, particularly from Western nations like the U.S. In fact, just last week, President Biden specifically addressed the Chinese influence, saying China, quote, is the only country with both the intent to reshape the international order and increasingly the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to advance that objective. There's a lot of pieces at play here that Biden's alluding to. One is the rapid rise in China as a technological hub. In regards to 5G wireless tech, cybersecurity, fintech, surveillance, semiconductors, and aerospace, they've become a technological rival to other world powers like the US. And this ties into their economic influence. China is also a massive manufacturing hub, and so Chinese policies can easily affect those who rely on their factories. One example of this is the country's zero-COVID policies, which to this day enforce unpredictable lockdowns that can disrupt supply chains in an instant. As an aside, it's also worth noting that the Russia-Ukraine war has countries all over re-examining their international trade and business dealings, considering how consequential it's been for those opposing Russian antics, but also being reliant on something as vital as oil and gas, which I've broken down in past episodes. So some wonder if and when similar situations could unfold for those heavily reliant on Chinese exports. In fact, I've talked about the eerily similar situation to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and China and Taiwan. Taiwan has been a self-governed and democratic region for decades, whose leadership consider themselves as sovereign from mainland China. But China still considers Taiwan a part of their regime, and Xi has warned of consequences should the international community attempt to back the island's efforts. He said, quote, "We insist on striving for the prospect of peaceful reunification with the greatest sincerity and best efforts, but we will never promise to give up the use of force and reserve the option to take all necessary measures." In fact, investing in a stronger military was another theme of his speech. This isn't even mentioning the domestic policies that affect the Chinese population, such as internet censorship and human rights abuse claims. All this is to say that China's relationship with the rest of the world is complicated. For many of the reasons I mentioned, the West is at odds with many of President Xi's ways, but also no one wants to start a wider confrontation between world powers. But this is one of the reasons why the new leadership is so significant. If Xi's desire to stay in power for the long term is then cemented by an inner circle unlikely to provide alternative perspectives, does that mean the country's headed for a regime resembling a dictatorship? And if so, then what does that mean for Chinese policy and consequently the rest of the world? You've just been informed, so now it's time to get on with your day. I'm Michele Carroll. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode and want to continue following a healthier alternative for staying informed, where I forgo partisan fighting and fear-driven narratives and just get to the point, then please be sure to hit that subscribe button, as of course you'll get more of this show in your feed, and also you'll be helping this new channel grow and reject sensational media. Thank you so much for your support, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.